In today's video, we will look at how to convert fractions into decimals. This simply involves dividing the numerator by the denominator. Let's look at some familiar fractions and decimal values you may already know. The fraction 1 over 4, or 1/4, can be represented this way, 1 part out of 4. What is the decimal equivalent of 1 over 4, or 1/4? Well, we know sometimes we refer to 1 over 4 as 1/4. And we know in money that 1/4 is 25 cents. And we write that like this, 25 cents. Sometimes we've seen it written like this, with a dollar sign, 0.25. In the middle is a decimal point. And therefore, we know that 1 over 4 must equal 0.25. Let's place that over here in facts that we know. We know that 1/4 is equal to 0.25. We will always remember that and we will never forget it. Now let's look at 1/2, 1 over 2. What decimal value is equivalent to 1/2? 1/2 is represented as 1 part out of 2 parts. If we again go to money and we say, how much is half of a dollar? Well, we know half of a dollar is 50 cents, represented by 2 25-cent pieces. And we can write 50 cents in this way. Sometimes we may have seen it written like this, with a dollar sign in front, 0.50, the decimal point in the middle. And so therefore, a half as a decimal must be 0.50. Again, we'll write this in the facts we know. 1/2 equals 0.50. Now let's look at 3/4, or 3 over 4. What decimal value does that represent? We can represent 3/4 in this way, 1, 2, 3 parts out of 4. We say this is 3/4. And again, if we look at money, and we have 3 25-cent pieces, or 3/4 in money, we know that that is 75 cents. And sometimes we see it written as 0.75 with a dollar sign in front. The decimal point is in the middle, and so 3/4 must represent 0.75. Again, we will put that under the facts we know. 3 over 4, or 3/4, is equal to 0.75. It helps when you think of money to remember what the decimal equivalent is of the fraction. 1 over 4 is equal to 0.25. 1 over 2 is equal to 0.50. 3 over 4 is equal to 0.75. Now let's look at the steps involved to change fractions to decimals so that we don't have to keep referring to money. 1 over 4. We know that this is 1/4 and we already saw that this is equal to 0.25. Let's look at the steps involved to get our answer. Step 1. We set up a division problem by dividing the numerator by the denominator. And so we take 1 and we divide it by 4 in this case. Step 2. We determine how many times the divisor, which is 4 in this question, can go into the dividend, which is 1. The divisor is 4, the dividend is 1. How many times can 4 go into 1? That's the same as asking, if I had 1 circle, how many groups of 4 can I make? Well, I know I don't have enough to make a group of 4, so therefore 4 cannot go into 1, and we put a 0 in its place. Step 3. Place a decimal point after the whole number in the question and right above it in the answer. So we're going to place a decimal point after the number 1 and after the 0. Step 4. Place a 0 to the right of the decimal point in the question. So we will have 1.0. 1.0 almost looks like the number 10. Step 5. We divide the dividend by the divisor and subtract. 4 goes into 10 twice, and 2 times 4 is 8. And subtracting, we get 2. We're not finished yet. We have to go one more step, step 6. Bring down a 0 and divide again by the dividend. Here is our 0 that we bring down. And now we have the number 20. 4 into 20 goes 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. Again, we subtract. 20 take away 20 is 0. And when we subtract and get 0, we stop. And we say our answer is 0.25. And we can see that that is 25 cents. Now you try. Let's convert 2 over 5 to a decimal. We start off, step 1, by dividing 2 by 5. We set up our division problem like this: 2 divided by 5. The numerator will always go on the inside of the division sign. The denominator will always be on the outside. Step 2, we will determine how many times the divisor can go into the dividend. We know that 5 cannot go into 2 because we cannot make a group of 5 out of only 2. The divisor is 5 and the dividend is 2. 5 cannot go into 2. We put a 0 on top. Step 3, place a decimal point after the whole number in the question and right above it in the answer. So we have 2 point and 0 point. Step 4, we place a 0 next to the right of the decimal point in the question. Now this looks like the number 20, and we can use that to continue solving our problem. Step 5, divide the dividend by the divisor and subtract. 5 into 20 goes 4 times. 4 times 5 is 20. When we subtract, we get 0. And now we are finished. Our answer is 0.4. 2 over 5 is equal to 0.4. Now let's try 1 over 2, or 1/2. Let's convert 1/2 to a decimal. 1/2 is equal to what as a decimal? We will set up a division problem, step 1, and we will divide 1 by 2. Step 2 tells us to determine how many times the divisor could go into the dividend. 2 cannot go into 1, it's not big enough, so we put a 0. Step 3, place a decimal point after the whole number in the question and right above it in the answer. Step 4, place a 0 next to the right of the decimal point in the question. Now this looks like the number 10. Step 5, we divide. 2 into 10 goes 5 times, and 5 times 2 is 10. When we subtract, 10 take away 10 is 0, and we are finished with our question. 1 over 2 is equal to 0.5. We can add a 0 after the 5, which does not change the value of our answer. And now that looks like what we started off earlier when we talked about $0.50. 0.50 is equivalent to 1/2. Now let's convert 3 over 4 to a decimal. 3 over 4 equals what as a decimal? Step 1, we'll set up our division problem, and we divide 3, the numerator goes under the division sign, by 4, denominator goes outside of the division sign. Step 2, we determine how many times the divisor can go into the dividend, and we see again that 4 cannot go into 3. 3 is too small to make one group of 4, so we place a 0 on the top. Step 3 tells us to add the decimal points. Step 4 tells us to place a 0 next to the decimal, and we can see that this looks like the number 30. We know 30 can divide by 4. Step 5 tells us now to divide. 4 into 30 goes 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. 30 take away 28 leaves us with 2. Because we have the number 2 when we subtract and not 0, we have to continue the question. Step 6 says bring down a 0 and divide again. Now that looks like the number 20, and we know 4 into 20 goes 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. 20 take away 20 is 0, and now we are finished. And 3/4 now, as a decimal, is 0.75. Again, we remember from the beginning, we saw that 75 cents was 0.75, which was equivalent to 3/4. What did you notice about every decimal answer we did previously? Let's look at them again. 1 over 4 was equal to 0.25. 2 over 5 was equal to 0.4. 1 over 2 was equal to 0.5. 3 over 4 was equal to 0.75. What do you notice about each one of these answers? What is the same? What is common to all of them? You'll probably see by now that every single one of those starts off with 0 point something. This is a fun fraction fact. When converting proper fractions to decimals, your answer will start with 0, then the decimal point. You can see here that a half is 0.5, 1/3 is 0.33 continuous, 2/3 is 0.66 continuous, 1/4 is equal to 0.25, 3/4 is equal to 0.75, 1/5 is 0.2, 2/5 is 0.4, 3/5 is 0.6, 4/5 is 0.8. Every single one of these fractions, when we convert it into a decimal, is 0 point something. This will happen every time you take a proper fraction and convert it into a decimal. And now you've solved the mystery of how to convert fractions to decimals.